All right, live from Dogleg Brewery in Fort Worth, Texas, it's time for You Can't Brew That on Television. And now, here are your hosts, Brewmeisters Kyle and Bono.
Good evening, Internet, and welcome once again to Dogleg Brewery in Fort Worth, Texas. I am the Reverend Ryan Bono.
And I am Kyle, Brewmeister LaPointe.
Kyle the Brewmeister LaPointe. And we are here, as we are every Monday, helping you bridge the gap. I've had
It's a bigger gap than normal.
It's a bigger gap than normal. It's huge. We're helping you bridge the gap between beer snob and frat boy. I almost said beer boy and frat snob. What is wrong with me tonight?
What we try to do here is talk about beer in a fashion that maybe behooves people who really know a lot about beer and people who really drink a lot of beer. So
yeah, and we're both.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think we're both. I think we're more on the drinking than the knowing, but we have our moments in both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're not devoid of knowledge.
So what are we doing tonight?
We're drinking beer.
Awesome. Let's get started.
We're drinking Hungarian beer.
Yeah, tonight we're drinking a beer that was imported from Hungary by a fan of the show. And she actually did this. I'm really looking forward to trying this. It's something that she told me her grandpa used to drink a lot when she was a little girl, so that's going to be neat. And then we're trying the Raw Ass Kisser. It's kind of a neat story behind that we'll get into here in a little bit.
It's and in doing what we're doing tonight, you'll notice that somebody brought us beer, in which we are now drinking.
We definitely applaud people bringing us beer.
We like it when people bring us beer. And if you bring us beer, whether you make it or whether you buy it, we'll spotlight that beer. We'll talk about that beer. If it's one of your favorite beers and you want us to talk about it, you don't have to buy it. You don't have to bring it to us. But if it's something that you can only find in a certain area and you know we can't get it, bring it. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right, we're opening the Dreher.
This is a beer called Dreherbach. This is a very old Hungarian brewery. I believe it is the oldest Hungarian brewery, and this is their darkest beer that they make. Actually, in Hungary, Hungarians aren't really into the super dark beers. I'll go ahead and carry this one up. Yeah, I mean it's dark, but it's not like Guinness dark, you know. I'm gonna show this one off to the audience here. We've got, I guess it's pretty black, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially there on camera. You can see it's got a nice thick head to it.
Green bottle. For those of you in the know, green bottles not always great. They don't block all the sun. All right, so I smell a lot of melanoidin in this.
Yeah, there's quite a bit.
It's melanoidin's like if you're baking bread and you smell bread in the house. If anybody's ever baked bread before, or you've been to an actual bakery, not maybe the bakery at Kroger or anything, but a place where they're making like a really
like a real factory,
like pumpernickel or something like that, really deep bready flavor that just permeates the air. That's kind of what a melanoidin. If you hear that word.
This is just bursting with that melanoidin. There's nice caramel backing to it though. That's really nice.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's good beer.
That is really good beer.
Yeah, I enjoy that. That's all the things that you smell, you taste.
Yeah, exactly. You get the same things in the palate they get in the aroma. It's very well attenuated. It's almost dry, but not. I mean, it's getting close. It's got a really loose mouthfeel.
Yeah,
I like it a lot.
Oh yeah,
that is a really good beer.
Yeah, I mean it's got a little alcohol back note, but it's not too much to where.
Yeah, Hungary, by the way, not exactly famous for its beer, but I think it should be.
Well, I'd like, if anybody's out there and they are members of beeradvocate.com or ratebeer.com or any of these, look that up for us while we're doing this. Maybe Richard could look it up. Or
Dreherbak.
I'll put it up to the camera for everybody.
I'll just put it on the chat board.
All right. Dreherbach. All right. Well, hopefully you can read that with my nice big shaky hands.
Yeah, well, we're enjoying the heck out of this. What kind of topics do we have tonight?
We're going to do a little Texas beer news.
Got some Texas beer news. We're going to be talking about apps for the iPhone, actually for the Droid is what we're going to be talking about.
We're both Droid users, so specifically we'll talk about that.
And once we started getting into the Droid apps that are beer related, we found out that there's a lot more than we can cover in one episode. So we're going to make this a two-parter.
Yep.
Probably finish the second one during our season finale. And we've actually got one person on board and one person we're going to try to get on board to be our iPhone correspondents because neither of us use iPhone. So we'd kind of like to see what's out there for the iPhone as well. So we're going to be looking at that, and we're also efforting an interview with a beer app developer.
Yep.
Well, we're in touch with the guy. He wants to do the interview. We're just trying to figure out how it's going to work as far as the tech stuff goes. That's something that we're really excited about.
It's it's an amazing thing these days, brewing and brewing software, and how far they've come over the last part of a half a decade. They've really they've come into
really
their own.
Exploded.
There are some great softwares out there available for computers that make brewing just so much simpler, because a lot of the math and the calculations kind of drive people away that aren't the engineer nerd type, and these kind of software.
Do you know any engineer nerd types that brew is?
I'd say dramatically, it's probably about 50 to 75% of the people are chemists slash
scientists, engineers,
yeah.
Something. There's a lot of brewers out there that have a sciencey background. Sciencey is it's an industry term for those of you.
Right. They teach that in
science-ish.
They teach that in Exit to Engineering.
That's right.
Which is the one you take after Intro to Engineering.
Right. Also known as statics.
Right.
Whoa,
engineering joke.
Engineer joke. Nobody liked that but us. Let's talk about some news. We've got a lot of really neat stuff about RAR tonight. We had trouble narrowing it down to only a few little pieces of news, but why don't you start with some of the new equipment they've got out there at RAR?
RAR has a brand new bright tank and brand new fermenting unit.
Now, for those not in the know, what are they going to do with a bright tank?
Well, first thing you do is ferment a beer, right? And fermenting a beer makes a ton of extra crud. And once it makes all this extra crud, you want to get the clean beer off of that crud and put it in a tank all by itself to brighten up and clear up so you can sell it. And does Brinkley no longer want to talk about bright tanks?
I don't think she does. The studio audience very bored with the discussion tonight.
Yeah, the blondes in the room were over their heads.
Just ready to leave.
Well,
yeah, I think it was the engineer joke that did say.
So anyway, the bright tank basically is just what it is. It clears up the beer and it allows it to attenuate fully and become the tasty beer, because beer that's young tastes young. It's going to have a higher alcohol content. It's going to take a little more harsh flavors into the flavor profile. So you want to let it sit a little bit and get a little clearer. And that's what the bright tank's for.
Absolutely. So they've got their new bright tank. This weekend, they've actually got two events that RAR is going to be sponsoring. One is they're doing a chili cook-off to benefit the Women's Safe Haven of Fort Worth. That's going to be here in Fort Worth. And at the same time, they're also doing, over at Stroker's Ice House in Dallas, they're doing the second annual Texas Beer Fest. And in that, you're going to get to sample beer from all over Texas, and you pay $10 to give you a mug and 6 tickets, and each one of those tickets gets you a taste, and then is $1 a taste from then on. So one last thing that we want to discuss, a little piece of news from RAR, and we've talked in this show a lot in the past about food pairings. We like to pair beer with food, and that's something that is going to become a prominent feature in the show during Season 2. But
it's becoming more prevalent in all the world, because now that we have not only a sophisticated, genre of different types of beers, right? You can get a whole lot of different types of beers. And now that that's available to so many people in so many areas, people realize now, well, this beer tastes better with this food. This beer, okay, now I'm tasting nothing but alcohol and bitterness. That's not good.
Right.
And so
yeah, there are some bad pairings out there as well as some really neat ones.
And ultimately, that's what you learn when you actually start getting into pairing things with beer, is that it's not necessarily about finding that perfect pairing like people would with wine, because, I mean, wine, you're talking like some of those pairings, you need that $1,000 bottle to get that pairing. With beer, it's more or less making sure you don't have something that doesn't match.
Yep.
That's the way I look at it.
You know, I really like to look at it that way too, because when you get something that doesn't match, it really extracts the flavors from both the food and the beer.
Yeah, you'll kill some of the good stuff.
The dichotomy just really comes out. Now, next Thursday at, let me make sure I get this right, Pop's Safari Bar in Fort Worth, RAR is going to be sponsoring a cigar pairing which is something we haven't even mentioned on the show. I've never really. I mean, I'm aware of pairing wine and cigars, so I imagine you've got to be able to pair beer and cigars. But I've never seen a brewery or a pub sponsor this kind of thing. So something I'm personally really looking forward to. It sounds like we're both going to be there.
Yeah, I think I may have to go. By the way, about this beer, I was interested to learn when I read the back. It says Mindent Bellatontunk Ami Egi Barna Sword Gazdezaga Tez.
We speak in tongues here.
I did not know that prior to having this beer.
Wild and strange tongues, and Kyle is apparently learning Hungarian. Actually, I bet if you go to this really cool website that ends in .hu, which I can only imagine is Hungary's form of com, I bet you'll get some really neat Hungarian stuff.
Man, so, I mean, this beer is excellent. I was actually looking on there to see if they mentioned the alcohol content, because there it is, right there. It's 7.3%. It rolls in there pretty nice, though. It doesn't taste it.
Do you think in Europe, do you think they're doing that by volume or mass?
It is by volume, because I think that V, V.
Oh, okay.
Would, But anyway.
Well, let's talk about some beer apps.
Before that, let's roll out the trivia. See if you got this. Along the lines with our Texas brewing, I've got a trivia question for you tonight about Texas brewing and new Texas breweries.
All right, let's see it, Rich.
The trivia question for you, Bono. What is the latest brewery to open in Texas?
Oh, my first guess would be 512, just because that's the latest one I've seen jump onto the scene. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the latest brewery to open.
You don't know it? You don't know it is what I'm going to say now.
I'm going to go with 512, actually. And
Jester King has just opened.
Really?
And Jester King...
and where is Jester King?
I believe Jester King is in Austin, along with pretty much a dominant amount of the number of breweries in Texas. A little more hippie-esque areas, so they do some of this stuff, the home cooking type deal, so you're going to make craft brew. Well, the beer that I just had from them over at the Flying Saucer, they tapped this last week, last Friday. Faz and I went out there to Flying Saucer to discuss some housing renovations we're going to be working on soon, and we had their Commercial Suicide, which I believe is their first beer that they're releasing to the public.
Cool.
And they're brand new brewery.
And how was the Commercial Suicide? What sort of beer was it?
I can understand why they went with Commercial Suicide. This was an English special bitter, not even an extra special bitter, just a special bitter.
Okay.
And it was fermented or at least aged on oak whiskey casks.
Oh, cool.
It was very interesting. So this was a cask ale, and they had to actually, cask carbonate it and pump it with a beer engine. It got to us. It had absolutely no head. It was pretty well dead. You could see the oils on top of the beer. And I guess my first thought on it was it kind of highlights why people use really strong beers and strong alcohol beers when they're doing whiskey keg.
Yeah.
Because you're talking a 3.5%, 4% at the most style of beer, of alcohol, and then you put it on that whiskey cask. It tasted like
whiskey,
like a whiskey special bitter. It tasted like both of those things.
That sounds really cool.
It was interesting. It was a very interesting beer.
Well,
I've never had anything like it. So.
As long as you bring up whiskey cask beer, RAR does have their whiskey warmer currently sitting and soaking in some whiskey barrels, so that's always something to look forward to.
Their winter warmer's a great recipe anyway.
Winter warmer's great, and then you mix it, you put it in the whiskey cask, and it's just out of this world. So we're about to open the RAR Ass Kisser here in a minute. Kyle, why don't you talk about what's going on with the Ass Kisser? Because this isn't just a RAR thing here.
No. Ass Kisser was they originally brewed wines, and they wanted to get into to brewing some beer, and they've contacted the folks over at RAR Brewery, and RAR will be producing their beer under the label Ass Kisser Ales, but it gets their little mention of RAR Brewery on there.
Yeah.
And they're going to be making mostly these bomber style of beers, which are these large 22-ounce bottles. And up until recently, they weren't able to do this, but with the roofing collapse that damaged their bottling line, they were able to get a new bottling line that can handle these 22-ounce bombers. And I tell you, I'm interested in trying it because I'm hoping that RAR will produce some of their own 22-ounce bottles and some of their own big bottle lines, because it's a great way to produce something like a whiskey warmer.
Absolutely.
Something where you want a higher alcohol content, so you want to sell it by the bottle, $6, $8, $10 a bottle instead of $6, $8, $10 a 6 or a 4-pack.
Exactly.
So it gives you that ability, and somebody can open it and share it with other people, and it's not like this special event. So we're looking forward to that, man. I mean, I hope to see that down the road.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about some beer apps, and then after that, let's talk about the latest creation from Dogleg and how we turned a negative into a positive.
Yeah, that's always fun.
I'd like to start with talking about the Android Beer Directory.
Okay.
Have you used that one?
I have not.
Okay. Then I guess this is one the one that I'm going to talk about. The Android Beer Directory is essentially a way of having a beer advocate style of information right there on your Android phone. So you're at the pub, and let's say that you're looking in the menu, and you don't, like this was actually very useful. Oh my gosh.
The hops just come right out of the
jump
bottle.
out and punch you in the nose. That is nice. This was actually very helpful when I was in North Carolina a few months back, because there were a lot of beers on the menu that I didn't recognize. Local beers there. So I was able to go to my Android Beer Directory and look up each beer by name or by brewer or even by region. It's a really neat program, very easy to use. I was very, very pleased with the amount of information. You look up a beer, and it gives you a lot of BJCP style of information. It's going to give
BJCP is the Brewing Judging Certification Program.
Judging Certification Program. It gives you aroma, appearance, which it's in front of you, so you know what it looks like. But it gives you aroma, flavor.
I said brewing, I meant beer.
A lot of times when we're tasting beers, and this is something that I'm actually still dealing with. I'll taste flavors that I can't immediately recognize. Like, I know that they're there, but I can't articulate them. And so it's always nice to have something like the Android Beer Directory say, this beer is bursting with melanoidin, for instance. We talked about melanoidin in the last beer, so you know what you're tasting, and then you read that it's melanoidin, and that helps you identify it in future beers.
Bono, is that red?
Yeah, that's definitely red.
It's got some citrusy hops, but also a little bit of piney note in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of citrus and pine, but there's some malt peeking through the hops.
So like we said, you always try to smell things first, right? And talking about this program, and it's able to help people maybe articulate what they're thinking in their head.
Yeah, so it's a really neat program. My only complaint with it is that it is somewhat limited, and I suppose that for somebody that doesn't go out drinking new and exciting beers every weekend, it would be an extraordinary program.
That's really good.
Yes, it is. I had this a few weeks ago. This, by the way,
big and flowery in the taste.
Yeah.
The floral hops don't really come out because they're kind of back note to the piney and the citrus type hops. But in the flavor, they come out big time.
And there's a nice caramelized toasted malt, just sort of ring behind all of the hops.
It's definitely
it gives the flavor has a lot of depth.
Yeah, it's definitely a deep flavor. I would agree with that. Man, that's good.
Kelsey wants to know what the alcohol percentage is on the Raw Ass Kisser, and I believe it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 8. It's actually 9%.
It's a double IPA, so 9%
alcohol by volume.
makes sense. Yeah, I was going to say it wouldn't be anything less than 8 with the double IPA, and that's kind of part of the whole understanding beers and understanding what you're buying is a very big thing. So that brings me to the BJCP.
Let's talk about the BJCP
app is,
and they have this one for iPhone as well. My iPhone correspondent informed me this afternoon.
There's not much to the BJCP droid. I've talked to the guy who made this app a couple times, and he's increasing the stuff. Actually, he just recently added a few different notes to this, but he's coming up with some ideas on how to do this. You know, he's got a little SRM guide to it, so you can tell how dark a beer is. But you know, it's basically a color chart. And you know, if you want to go into that type of depth, that allows you to use your phone to actually judge a beer. But what we like is that if there's a certain style of beer, you can go onto this app and go, oh man, what are we falling in? Is the beer we're brewing in this category of this? And you load it up, and it's got every bit of information that's on the BJCP website.
Or if you don't know what beer or if you know what beer you're going for. For instance, yesterday we were trying to brew a brown porter, and so we had the BJCP at our hands when the question came up: how much hops do we need in this?
Yep.
Do we need a lot of bittering? Do we need a lot of flavor, aroma? None of any of them. And so it was very convenient to have the BJCP right there while we were brewing, right there handheld.
And for those of you who don't know us, we've traditionally not brewed for styles. That's not been our really. That's not our goal. We try to brew for flavors, not for styles.
We brew good beer is what we endeavor to do. But here we do have the Blue Bonnet Brew Off coming up.
Yep.
And we're getting to a point. We had some success in the last brew competition that we entered.
Yep.
And we kind of enjoyed it. We'd kind of like to do that again.
Yeah, we wouldn't mind dragging home some ceramic. We brought home some wood and some glass from the Iron Mash. You know, winning the first place medal at the Iron Mash, which is basically improvisational beer brewing.
I guess that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, you have to be able
beer brewing.
Yeah, you have to be able to brew a beer on somebody else's terms.
Yeah.
And we've always felt that way because typically we plan only to so much extent, and you know, we're both busy folks with our jobs and side jobs and all that fun stuff. So when we go to brew a beer, we don't necessarily have everything we would have really wanted to have. We don't plan for 2 weeks and have everything set up. Usually if we've started planning Friday for Saturday's brew session, then we're in pretty good shape.
Hold on. With the delay, we answered, Kelsey asked a question about the Dreher Bock, and we answered it about the Raw Ass Kisser.
The Dreher Bock is 7.7%.
Yeah, 7.7% on the Dreher Bock.
Also a big boy beer.
Yeah, also a big beer. Yeah. Hungarians don't mess around. So, I'm sorry, I totally lost.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I was just discussing. The best thing about this BJCP app that I like is that if you're in a store and you grab a bottle of beer and you say, "Oh, I love this beer. What does this style mean?" You know, it says on this bottle it's a Northern English brown. Well, what is the Northern English brown? You can read about it and then go, "Oh, those are the flavored things I like."
Yeah.
And then you go through the store and you maybe find another beer that looks, you know, that sounds like it's something that you want, and you check that style and you say, "That sounds like that Northern English brown I was having. That, you know, that brown porter. I'll try this brown porter because it sounds a lot like the Northern English brown." And they really are very similar.
Yeah, exactly. It is a pretty neat and very organized way to, as we always say on this program, expand your beer horizons.
Yeah, very much so. And now we'll briefly talk about a couple of these brewing apps.
Yeah, let's touch on Bruiser, and then let's leave some of the rest for the next episode.
Well, the two that I've played with here, as far as actual active recipe brewing things for the Droid, are the Bruiser and the Beer Droid, or excuse me, Brew Droid. And those two are both apps that allow the recipe on your phone and use that for making a beer. And they both got their strengths and weaknesses, and I think we'll go into more detail later. But ultimately, I think that this is a great functionality of brewing, is to be able to take your phone instead of a computer, instead of a handwritten note, or however you would do it before. It would have either involved a computer or a printout from a computer or a handwritten note that is telling you all the things that are going on. Well, when you're brewing beer, stuff always goes wrong. I mean, unless you're just perfectly prepared and everything goes right. And I tell you what, if everything goes right, I'm bored when we're brewing. We're looking for something else to do. I mean, we're waiting for this to break or this to not work. Or shoot, the other day, didn't we one time we burnt a hose that we were supposed to be using, and we had to doctor a hose, and luckily we had enough spare parts to fix it.
We screw up so much stuff that we get really good at brewing on the fly, which is actually the subject of our last discussion for tonight. But so we'll get into that in a second.
Yeah, and again, these brewing softwares, I think right now they are in their infancy, and it's kind of nice to have these. And I actually built a recipe on both Beersmith, which is what we use to design our recipes, and I built it on BrewDroid, and I built it on Bruiser. And all of they all worked well. And building a recipe was very functional.
And they all have a lot of really neat, simple equations that you need on the fly. Like for instance, drawdown volume. It's got a thing where you can tell it the dimensions of your brew pot and how far down the top of your liquid is, and it'll tell you what volume of liquid you have. And so just things like that, like a lot of neat, simple equations that you need on the fly are just right there at your fingertips.
And if you're ready to go prior to with these kind of softwares, and you know adjust it to your brewing system, it works out really well. So we'll go into more detail about these, and hopefully
season finale. I'm thinking because next week is our big cider special.
Yeah, and we can take a little more time because I really feel like we'd have to be too cursory to talk about these because there's other apps too. I mean, like Beer Mapping, I think is a fantastic Droid app.
Beer Mapping is a really neat one, and that one is one I believe is also on the iPhone.
Yeah, and download that. You don't even have to know it's Beer Mapping. It'll tell you where every beer place is, anywhere where you're at, and the fact that it picks up where you're at, it's just great. It'll put a radius. I need every beer place within 10 miles. There it is.
Right there.
You get beer stores, brewing equipment stores. You get everything you could ever imagine. It's wonderful. So
let's talk about turning a negative into a positive, because this is a fun story.
So, like we said earlier, we often break stuff while we're brewing or forget stuff.
Yeah, I think
man.
We kind of forgot and broke in one foul swoop yesterday.
Yeah, and so we invited somebody over to brew, and a friend of mine from a long while back. And
so we needed some extra work to send home with him because he needed some beer too.
Little miscommunication. We didn't know that he was going to be taking it home or not. We didn't have a firm answer. So we said, who cares? We'll just we'll brew, and if he comes over, we'll give it to him. If he doesn't want to take it, we won't give it to him. No big deal. We were only ready for 2 beers, but then he got there. Everything was running smooth. So we decided, well, shoot, let's brew another.
Let's just make up a beer on the fly.
Yeah, let's make up another beer. We got everything out. We got 2 mash tuns. Let's make another beer.
So we decided that what we would do is we would take some pale malt.
Right. We had pale malt. We didn't have anything else. Just pale malt.
Just base pale malt. We decided we would toast it a little bit. Mm-hmm. Make a nice biscuity type of beer. Just like a pale. Maybe
just a dry toast.
Throw some hops in there to beef it up a little bit.
Yeah. So we were going to basically make a biscuity American pale ale, something like that. Somewhere you get a little depth of flavor beyond just the pale malt. And so we put it in the oven. And, my wife was there to watch me, but didn't notice that I turned it to broil.
Yeah, turned it to broil and left. We were outside. We were designing recipes on our iPhone, on our droids, actually.
Figured we would come back in and check on it every couple minutes, but we got sidetracked.
And it set on fire.
Yeah, a little bit of fire. Wife came out and said, are you cooking or are you burning?
We didn't quite burn down the house.
No,
but yes, thank you.
It was definitely a fail. But
it was definitely a colossal failure.
You could turn a fail into a positive, and that's what we did. Both of us being the engineers, and hopefully we have time to throw off your little side discussion about engineers knowing everything, right?
To hear that.
But anyway, I walk in and I go, oh crap, it's burning and smoldering, so maybe if I open this up, I can take it out outside, do something. And of course, when you add oxygen to a fire, it reignites and gets bigger. And so I close it.
The audience really excited about this story, by the way.
And so I close the door, and then I talk to my wife, and I say, well, I'm trying to, should I throw a bunch of water on it? And she's like, it's an oven fire, babe. Just close the oven and let it go out. And I'm not necessarily thinking about this whole process from a, how do we stop the fire in the oven? But I'm also thinking about it from, man, I really wanted to use that grain that's in there.
I was a lot more concerned about the malt than your house.
Exactly. And so, then Bono comes in and sees what's going on, and being the ever-curious engineer, he opens the...
To see what's going on.
And
look, it's a flame.
Yeah, it wasn't as big a fire until I opened this.
Look, it's getting bigger.
So we, of course, slap him in the back of the head and close the oven. And we waited, about 20, 30 minutes and made the process go on with how we were doing the rest of the beers. We didn't need it right away. Didn't need any of that grain. And we were cooking on 2 different shelves and doing a couple. We're trying to get some depth of grain with that cooking.
So now what we've got is we've got pale malt. We've got toasted malt because some of the malt did get well toasted.
Well toasted. Yes.
We've got roasted malt and we have ash.
Yeah.
So we got the ash out of there.
Got the totally burnt ash.
Yeah, and now we're left with pale, toast, and roast.
Yeah.
And it occurred to us pretty quickly that this is exactly how the Scots used to brew.
Yeah.
Only their accident was that their barley wouldn't malt. Our accident was that we set our barley on fire. So slightly different from how the Scots used to malt brew. But the fact remains that we had a lot of pale malt, we had a little bit of toast, and a little bit of roast. And we decided to just throw that together and make a Scottish beer out of it.
Yeah, Scottish beer you're allowed to have peat smoke, right? Well, I mean, it's not peat, but it's still peat, smoke.
But yeah, it's definitely
there was a lot of smoke.
Yeah, it's definitely a smoky beer.
So, there was a little bit of the roasted malt still left in there. I mean, a tiny percent to what the beer was. And so that's what we did. We threw it in there, and
it's got a nice tan color.
Yeah, we made a beer on the fly and caramelized it extra, and so basically we made a Scottish 80 out of that.
Yeah.
And we'll see if it works out. We had an English beer yeast ready to go because of of what we were brewing, which was actually a brown porter. So we had other English yeasts ready to go. So it wasn't a far cry to use an English yeast and go for that Scottish beer. So we said, let's give it a shot. We're ready to go with it.
If nothing else, it was a good time.
Mm-hmm. And so everything smelled good when we were making it.
Smells good in the fermenter, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And we'll see just how everything turns out. But we're calling this the fire sale.
Yeah. Dogleg Fire Sale. Thanks to Megan for that idea.
That was a good one. We always like to name our things apropos and a little bit on the funny side. So that's
definitely on the funny side.
It is, and apropos.
So make sure to tune in next week. We've got a really neat episode. We're going to be talking about cider. We're going to be tasting some Crispin hard cider.
I'm interested in this. This is going to be neat.
Yeah, I think you're going to be really pleased with what you get.
Okay.
We're gonna grab a few of their bottles from the store, and we're going to try each of them. And we're going to talk about some of the differences. And we're also going to compare them to some other ciders that we've had. We're not going to drink any of those other ciders, but we've both had plenty of cider, and so we're going to kind of make some comparisons. And we're going to try to get Jen on the show to do a cider episode, and it's just going to be all cider all the time.
And this cider, this particular company, doesn't just stick with the regular, here is our one cider recipe. They mix it up with their yeasts and mix it up with their flavors and add different adjuncts, kind of like Dogfish Head does.
Exactly, and in fact, they have been referred to as the Dogfish Head of cider.
Which, I mean, that's a bold claim.
It's very bold claim.
So I'm gonna walk into this. I'm gonna walk into this thinking this better be some good stuff, and I hope it is. I think it will be.
We're also gonna look at some of the similarities and differences in judging cider versus beer. And
there are some differences. Yeah, ciders and meads have some different nomenclature. That's what we always talk about. It's like everybody has their flavors that they recognize in their mouth and their palate and their nose and wherever they get the flavor sensations. But communicating that to somebody else is difficult. And
absolutely.
That's what the first thing you have to do when you're learning how to judge something is learn what you're tasting and how to communicate that to the person that's sitting right next to you. Then you can actually judge something and be able to say, well, this tastes like this and this tastes like this. And I always mention the, you remember things growing up. Like if you grew up eating nothing but Kraft mac and cheese, which I ate a lot of growing up. If you taste something and it reminds you of eating that plate of Kraft macaroni and cheese, there is something cheesy about this. There is something in there.
Or if it reminds you of going to the movies, it might be a little diacetyl.
Yeah, it might be some buttery. Because this reminds me of my first time of going to the movies. And your mind is telling you buttered popcorn. And you got to recognize that. Your mind is willing to accept what you're tasting. Live with it. Deal with it. Do it.
So what did we learn tonight? We learned that Hungarians make some amazing beer.
I learned that I very much underestimated Hungarians.
Yeah, I did too.
And so when we actually brew a beer out of a cauldron, like we're planning on doing sometime.
For Brewlash?
Yes, for our Brewlash day.
Yeah, we are talking about having Brewlash, where some of my Hungarian friends come out and make goulash while we brew.
Both out of cast iron cauldrons.
Cast iron cauldron.
And we're talking about doing this on an open flame. This is something we've been talking about for a while. So if you guys are interested, let us know.
It is going to be a neat experience, I think. So we've got that going. We learned about some applications for your phone to help you brew. We got some news.
More and more coming out every day, and a lot of these they want to get better. So download these apps. I think the most expensive one I've downloaded, $3, $4, $5. I mean, these guys are out there doing some hard work making these applications. Download their stuff, and if you have some critique, let them know. Most of them are very receptive. The people are very easy to communicate with via email, and all the apps that I've ever talked to, the designers of the apps, they have responded to me quickly, and they say, hey, I'll get to that, and I'll add that, and that's a great idea. Or, hey, I'm not going to add that, sorry. At least you know, right?
At least you get a response.
So, I've never had anybody not email me back from those. So, we've got a lot of great designers for these programs out there. Give them their $5. At the end of the day, hopefully they can become a millionaire from that.
Yeah. So, until our cider episode airs, we would just like you to always remember that we are not professionals.
So please try this at home.
Oh, God, that is awful.